Mene, Tekel, Perez, Ummah, Sinim. Signs America is doomed. This is the theme of today's program, and I'm sure it seems rather dire. It's because dire things have been happening in America recently. This is a radical message that no American would want to believe. However, if I'm right about this, then you will need to believe me for your own good. But why should you believe me? Listen to how I got here, and then judge my message. I'm going to begin in 2008. In that year, I received an understanding and a revelation regarding the book of Revelation. And much of it was unsealed to me, and I saw through it that the judgment court of heaven was actually convened in 2008 to begin the judgment of the nations. This is related to Revelation chapter 4 and 5 in the scriptures. Throughout most of 2008, on my radio program, On the Road to Zion, I set this out in a systematic way over many weeks, week by week, through that period. One of the primary things that I was showing had to do with the scroll that had been in the right hand of the Father, sealed with 7 seals. This scroll was put into the hand of Messiah, who then opened 4 of those seals. And at that time, the 4 horsemen of Revelation were released. And immediately there were effects here in the earth when that happened. And the black horse rider was the one that was most obviously felt. I spoke about this and broadcast my message in July of 2008 regarding the black horse rider. And in that message, I predicted that the black horse rider was about to bring global economic crisis. And that fall, global economic crisis came. This was just the beginning of the unfolding of this revelation. I wrote a book about it, announcing Judgment Day, announcing that this time of judgment had begun. And this book has been available since 2009. In 2011, I had a significant radio program talking about America. It was entitled Cracks in America. And I'd like to play excerpts from that program, Cracks in America, for you now.
Shalom. The theme for today's program is Cracks in America.
Yes, I think we're all concerned about the cracks that we're seeing in America as we record this program near the end of August 2011. It really has been a crazy summer. We had an earthquake in America. We had this unusual earthquake in Virginia, and the epicenter of that quake was less than 100 miles from Washington, D.C., was it not?
Had to evacuate the White House.
Yes. In fact, on August 24th, CBS News had this headline: Earthquake damages Washington Monument. There are cracks from the earthquake in the obelisk, the world's tallest obelisk, the Washington Monument.
And I bet everybody is just waiting to hear your opinion and take on that.
It gives some facts here. It tells us that the monument is the highest such structure in the world, being 555 feet. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. It's also the world's tallest stone structure. It was inspected after the earthquake and found to have cracks in the Washington Monument. Friends, I think we're seeing signs all around us. Some people think that something like cracks in the Washington Monument is nothing to consider out of the ordinary. Oh, it's normal.
No.
We've never had cracks in the Washington Monument. We have them now, but it's normal. Well, it's not normal, especially when you put it together with what's happening with America. You see, the Washington Monument for many people is a symbol of America, especially America's government. I see in that something symbolic of what is happening to America. I see a message in that. Cracks in the Washington Monument is something to be concerned about. This is a divine message, friends. If you see cracks in a dam, it's going to blow. Well, this is what we're seeing. These cracks in America are substantive. The cracks in the Washington Monument are really a sign of God's judgment on America. And yes, I'm not ashamed to tell you, America is under judgment. If you don't know that, then you really aren't paying attention very much to what is going on in our country. We have rejected our Father, who is the source of the liberty that we have had in the United States of America. We have shut the door on him in our public schools, in our public institutions. We have embraced a godless idea of evolution, that we all came here by chance simply because we don't want to acknowledge our responsibilities to our Creator. This is what we teach our people in public school, rather than teaching them that they have responsibilities to their Creator. Many of us teach and believe that marriage is some sort of a public institution that can be just as valid between people of the same sex as between a man and woman, which is God's idea of marriage. Constantly we're telling God that He's stupid and that our way is the best.
Many laws, many points in the culture are exactly opposite of what the Scriptures teach us.
It's very easy to see that. The country has gone into decadence. This is a decadent country.
Perhaps even hedonism.
Well, I think it's very interesting. There was video of the president at the time that the earthquake happened.
Yeah.
He's leaning on a golf club, talking on his cell phone, while the Washington Monument is being cracked and the White House is being evacuated. So what does this tell you about our country?
Oh, and he was on vacation at a very, very exclusive, expensive place.
Exactly, yeah, where all of the elite hang out on Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
So this is the picture that we have of what is going on in America. And I'm not just blaming our current president, because the underlying causes of these problems go back a long time. And, of course, the behavior of our current president is exacerbating those problems too. It's a prophetic spectacle, friends, and we're watching it on our television sets. Are we understanding what it's really telling us? It's telling us that America is under judgment, and for good reasons.
And America is full of cracks, and eventually those cracks are going to give way.
Right. And I'm not happy to tell you this, because I know a lot of really, truly great Americans. Wonderful people who do love the Lord and who respect Him and His Word, who are honest, hardworking people. But these are not the people that are held up as examples in our country. These are not the people that are even listened to in America. Our country is going the wrong way. There are cracks in America. The cracks that we are seeing in the Washington Monument, the cracks that we are seeing in Washington, these are very much akin to the writing on the wall. Do you see it? Do you understand it? Do you get the message?
And yet there's a sense that we don't even know the full part of it, that the government is even doing more, that there are individuals even doing more than these things that we see.
Yes, behind the scenes, it's much more evil than even, of course, we know. The corruption goes so deep. Yahweh is being kind because Babylon fell in one night. This is not what's happening with America.
No, he's much more gentle.
The reason is because there are many people in America still, though a minority, that love him. So he's doing things in such a way as to give us an opportunity to be prepared to be a part of his plan and not a part of what the world is doing. It's an opportunity for us to wake up and to choose a side and to act accordingly. And so what we're seeing in America is a decline towards dethronement. America is going to be taken off of the throne of the world. America is the one great superpower in the world. We're often told this, but this can end very rapidly. And in fact, there's nothing that could end it quicker than being broke. Once that happens, friends, America has many enemies in the world. And when America is down, they're going to see it as their opportunity to get their pound of flesh. So America is facing some very difficult things in the days ahead. I don't mean to scare you, but the truth is the truth. And what it says here is very much the writing on the wall. God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. You have been weighed on the scales and found deficient. That's the case right now for America. It's over now. Have your National Day of Prayer for America. You know how long we've been praying for America? And all the while, what has been happening?
Well, an objective look would say that the people that we've been praying for have toughened up their necks. They're not looking and they're not paying attention.
Listen, this has been going on for years and getting worse and worse. The elite in America, the people that actually run the country, they're not repenting, okay? Some of us think that if you just pray about it, everything's going to be okay. Well, when people don't repent, it's not going to be okay. Look at how many prophets Yahweh sent to his people, telling them to turn around. And they did not repent and did not repent. And finally, what happened? Desolation came to their country. Why should we think the United States is any different? Do you think it can't happen here? Let's talk a little bit about the Washington Monument today. In 2008, in the Washingtonian magazine, which is a magazine about Washington, D.C., it had an article, interestingly, calling Cracking the Code. Talking about cracking today, I find that kind of interesting. It has a big picture of the Washington Monument on the front of it, along with the layout of Washington, D.C., and all of the symbols that are actually part of the layout of the city. This magazine is not a conspiracy magazine, by the way. Far from it. But it acknowledges some interesting history about Washington. For one thing that's interesting is the involvement of Freemasonry with Washington.
Washington has 36 lodges of the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons, along with the big house of the Temple of the Scottish Rite on 16th Street and the towering George Washington Masonic National Memorial in Alexandria. Local Masons feel a strong bond to the area and to the history of the Republic, among whose founding fathers were many Masons, including George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and many Revolutionary War generals. Members claim that most signers of the Declaration of Independence were Masons.
This is another side of the history of the United States that some of us don't know about. This has been widely publicized, and this particular article is about a book by Dan Brown that focused on some of these things. In other movies, we've seen this. So this has been sort of coming forward lately about this Masonic connection with Washington, D.C., and that's what's focused on here. And, of course, this influence was quite great, with even George Washington himself being a Mason. Another leading Mason was Benjamin Franklin. He was an ambassador for the United States. He was a very important person, and he was also a Satanist. He was a member of the Hellfire Club. This is all documented. And not too long ago, the basement of his house was excavated, and they found the remains of people there. Of course, we don't want to think of one of our founding fathers as being so evil, so different explanations have been thought up for this, but the truth is he was a Satanist, and all of this really goes along with what you would expect from a Satanist. So what we're saying here is that there's another side to the founding of America, and this side is represented to us in this Masonic influence. It's a fact that the Masonic influence, particularly at the higher degrees, is very much involved in paganism and worship of the pagan gods. This is reflected in all these buildings built by the Masons in Washington, D.C. For example, if you go into the Capitol, if you look up at the Capitol dome, you will see a painting of heaven. But it's probably not heaven as you would recognize it, because
Yeshua's not there.
No, there is a Christ figure, but it's not Yeshua. And there are gods in this heaven, but it's not the true God. It's the ancient gods. The ancient Greek and Roman gods are painted there. George Washington is ascending up into their midst to become a god himself. Interestingly, this is surrounded by 72 stars, which we've talked on our program about the 70 nations. Sometimes that's seen as 72 nations. And these are the demon gods that rule over the 70 nations. So all of this shows that there was a pagan agenda in Washington, D.C., and we see this in all of these symbols. These symbols are on your money. When you look at the back of your dollar bill and you see the pyramid there with the all-seeing eye, you're seeing a symbol of the same thing that we're talking about. There is an influence behind America. This is the religion of the elite, friends, the people that actually run America. This is their religion, this pagan religion. So this is why there's been constant pressure, why they work so hard to get rid of the God of the Bible, to be able to get to a point where they can openly bring forth the worship of their gods. Now, that may sound weird to you, but you tell me why there are all of these Roman and Greek gods all over all of the important buildings in Washington, D.C. Give me an explanation for that in what is supposed to be a Christian country. You've probably seen some of the pictures of the layout of Washington, D.C.
And if you've ever visited, there's areas where you can get lost very easily because the streets aren't at right angles. They're not at right corners to one another. They go in weird directions in some parts of town.
Right. Well, for instance, resting at the White House is the apex of a pentagram. The street's laid out as a pentagram. And, of course, a pentagram is a very powerful magic symbol which is connected with the occult. Going off in the other direction is what is clearly the shape of a square and compass.
The Masonic symbol.
Right, the Masonic symbol. So these are two of the symbols that are really embedded in the city of Washington. You can draw a line from the U.S. Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial, and then roughly 2/3 away from the U.S. Capitol is where the Washington Monument is located. You can draw a straight line upward from there so that it makes a 45-degree angle, and it will take you directly to the Supreme Council 33rd degree temple. The White House is offset slightly from that line. Basically, what this is all about is that the Washington Monument, together with the U.S. Capitol, form an apparatus, actually a magical apparatus, that is operated by the Supreme Council. And anyone that understands how magic works, simply by looking at this, could see that. The fact that the White House is offset from that line tells you a lot. It tells you that it's not really the White House that is in control. All of this is visible in the layout of Washington, D.C. You have a pyramid formed, basically from the Washington Monument to the temple. Guess what, friends? It's exactly 13 blocks between the Washington Monument and the temple. 13, of course, is a very important number. In paganism, numbers are very important. Symbols are very important. And probably you've seen some of that and you think, oh, that's crazy. And I agree with you. It is crazy. But nevertheless, it's part of the pagan religion. And when you see all of these numbers, I'm going to tell you some more numbers today, pretty soon you start to realize that this is not all by accident.
People invest in what they believe in. The people who made Washington, D.C. invested in what they believed in.
These people have a huge amount of control. Certainly the Christian forces in America did not have enough control to control the layout of Washington, D.C. This was entirely controlled by the occultists. So what is the real power involved here? You see, at the same time that there was a very important believing presence in America, already there was an insidious evil involved that was behind it all in Washington, D.C. Now let's talk a little bit about the Washington Monument. I already read that the Washington Monument is 555 feet. 555 is an occult number. 111 is also an occult number. All multiples like that of 111.
Repeating numbers.
111, particularly series of ones, are involved in occultism. When you put 555 and 111 together, you get 666. 111 happens to be the length of the Washington Monument underneath the ground. You see, the 555 is the height of the Washington Monument above the ground.
But of course, something like that couldn't stand without a good base or foundation underneath it to hold it up. It just doesn't just start right at the ground level.
Right. So it's 111 feet underground for a total of 666 feet. The Washington Monument, as I said, is really a magical instrument. That's what it's created to be. Now, here's another thing about the Washington Monument. At its base, each side of the Washington Monument, this obelisk of the Egyptians, that's really where this originated, is 666 inches. 666 on each side. Is this a weird coincidence?
No.
666 feet tall and 666 inches at the base in each direction. These numbers have meaning. We wonder here where the 666 comes from, and it actually comes from the numbers on the 666 magic square. This is a magic square used by the worship of the sun god, used for binding and loosing things. And this is built into the Washington Monument. This is the significance of this number in the pagan religion.
For those of us who aren't pagans, binding and loosing of spirits?
At the bottom of the Washington Monument is a Bible.
So they're trying to bind the Bible?
That's right.
In the Washington Monument?
Yes. Yes. The Washington Monument is meant to bind the influence of the Bible. This is like telling God, you can't come here. We're in control here.
And of course, students of the scriptures know right away that this is the mark of the anti-Messiah.
Right. This gets a whole lot worse. This gets very complex in the way that this is built, but it has a definite purpose, and the purpose actually has to do with imparting a spirit into a man. And that's what this is really all about, as laid out in the layout of the city.
So the pagans intend to use it for that purpose.
They're the ones that built it, and they very well will use it for that purpose and probably have used it for that purpose.
And now there are cracks in this very device.
Right. See, when you see what this device actually is connected with, that it really is connected with dark magic.
Mm-hmm. Things we don't want to have anything to do with.
Right, and something directly offensive to God, this
Yahweh.
Binding of the Bible. This becomes very, very similar to what we were reading with Belshazzar and the holy implements from the temple.
Yahweh shook the ground and cracked this.
Exactly. So I believe that this is a message. You know, there's more than one level. To many of us, we just simply think of the Washington Monument as being representative of Washington and the government of the United States. And on that level, that being cracked has a message that I think everybody can see.
The country is going to tumble down. It's just a matter of time.
Right. To those who understand what the Washington Monument really is, and that it actually is a magic appliance that is used by the pagan elite who are running the country, who have actually tried to bind the influence of the Bible using this pagan structure, finding out that there's an earthquake at the time when the whole country is already shaking, and the Washington Monument is showing cracks.
It's not working for them.
There's a statement in this, and it's a statement that's very specific to these elite. And it's Yahweh telling them that they are being arrogant and they cannot control him, his influence. Here's this thing that they have set up to actually try and stop God, and he's put cracks in it.
Yeah.
The elite who understand these symbols should be shaking in their boots. Their knees should be knocking right now, like happened with Belshazzar.
Yes.
Because all of this is a very elaborate way to lock out the influence of Yahweh, and yet he broke through anyway.
Mm-hmm. He's bigger than that.
So he has shown them that he is more powerful, and in fact that he is allowing them to do what they're doing. And friends, he is. This is what the release of the Riders of Revelation is about. He has loosed the influence of these people and their plans, and he is allowing them to do the things that they have always planned to do. They will bring about the coming of this one world government. This is what all of this is for. He's going to allow them to have their day. But in the meantime, he is going to continue to show his greatness over their pagan gods. This is the sign that we see in the cracking of the Washington Monument. Well, all of this is what you could refer to as a bad omen for what's happening here in America. There is a battle going on between the forces of good and the forces of evil, and in a certain respect, it's the forces of evil that are going to win, as far as America is concerned. Not as far as individual believers are concerned, but the days of this country, as the great power that it's been, are indeed numbered. This is just a fact, and the throes of all of that are going to affect all of us. First of all, in the country, and then, of course, around the world. But America has to be set aside for the one world government to come in. This will happen. The reason this happened now, this crack that has happened in Washington, although probably most people would see it as a relatively little thing, it's not a little thing. This is the voice of God telling us that we have reached a tipping point.
Right.
That's where we're at. And things have been going downhill pretty rapidly since 2008. From this point, there's going to be an acceleration of that, an acceleration in the decline. We've reached a tipping point, and it's been decided. And we are headed towards the end of the economic system in America, the end of the glory of America, and we're headed towards this one world government.
The cracks in America that were caused by the Virginia earthquake bring up the question of earthquakes generally, and also of 2011. In these quotes, what you're seeing is certain things that were published surrounding the time of the Virginia earthquake, questioning what was going on in 2011, because there was an unusual number of great disasters that happened in 2011, and especially earthquakes. And it is a fact that earthquakes had greatly increased in that year. For example, one quote is, back in 2001, the world had 1,361 earthquakes of magnitude 5 or greater. In 2011, there were 2,800, a tremendous increase in the number of earthquakes. And of course, this reminds us immediately of the words of Messiah telling us about the last days and telling us great earthquakes would be one of the signs, along with famines or food shortages and plagues, by the way, and terrors, which we could interpret as terrorism, and great signs from or in heaven, which we've talked about a lot lately as well. All of these things marking the final generation of this world. Also, after that program we've just listened to, it was discovered that there were more cracks found in the Washington Monument than first known. One of them 4 feet long, and others, and all of this requiring millions of dollars in repairs to the Washington Monument. But in addition to that, the National Cathedral was hit by the earthquake. There were millions of dollars of damage done at the National Cathedral. Reminds us of Jeremiah 45:4. Behold, that which I've built will I break down, and that which I have planted I will pluck up, and this is the whole land. This is a sign for Christianity in America. We also learned that the U.S. Treasury had been damaged by the earthquake. Of course, this targets the American economy and economic system. It seems as a statement going across the government, the religion, and the economy of the United States that was made by this earthquake in 2011. And there was a message in this, of course, for the elite that put all of this into force and control it. Because of these added facts, in our next radio program, we brought this message, Washington Shaken, Not Stirred, in which we brought forth more of the same information, now bring in these added events. You might want to listen to this program too at some point when you have the time. This was broadcast September 2nd, 2011, and these 2 programs constituted this full message that we gave at that time regarding the cracks in America. The very next day after this message, this happened. Yes, the great Austin wildfires of September that began September 3rd, 2011. And when this happened, my family and I had mere minutes to act. We had to evacuate from the Zion headquarters because of the fire. We had virtually no warning, and we left virtually everything we had behind. Immediately when I got on the road, I noticed that my brakes were not functioning well. They were getting very squishy. So even though there was a crisis going on and there was chaos, I found myself driving out of the area to a place where I could get repairs on my brakes. And I paid over $2,000 in brake repairs, and the worker who worked on the brakes gave me this piece that you see here in the picture and told me that my brake cable had been cut with a tool. After taking care of all that, our family camped in a cabin in the Texas Hill Country until we returned to temporary housing back on the Zion property on November 7th, 2011. This was a time period of about 2 months that we were not allowed onto our property. When we did return, our property didn't look like this. This was the property before the fire. You can see it was essentially a beautiful pine forest. And when we returned, it looked like this. It was charred ashes everywhere. This is the day we moved back, November 7th, 2011. And we were glad to be back, and I think you can see that on the faces of our children. On the same day we returned to the property, November 7th, 2011, I received a call from a man I had never known and who had never known me. He said his name was Mark. He said he was a prophet. He said the Lord had told him to walk through the ashes of the Zion property. I agreed to let him do so, and I allowed him to walk the property alone by himself as long as he wanted with the Lord, which he did for several hours. I didn't bother him at all through that entire time. I was busy getting settled in our temporary housing there on the property. In time, I saw him retire to his van, where he then started writing. Eventually, that same day, he asked to speak to me to tell me what he had written. Before he started talking to me about it, I asked him if he'd let me record what he had to say. The whole situation had the feeling of an important message, and I wanted to have that for future reference. So he agreed to allow me to record it. Here's the first part of what he told me on that day, that first day that I returned to the property after the fire.
He asked me, this question. He said, "What did you see in the ashes?" And so I said, complete destruction. And then he replied back, "No, you are wrong. This is complete reconstruction. It is my will that this man's house face the east so that he may see and mentally dwell on my country Israel. He shall rebuild here and look through the destruction and see that the earth is going to pass away like this house. He should always remember this and remind him, I will bring him home." The first word he gave me was foundation. As I was standing over your old house, many years ago I took down all that he had and rebuilt him on my foundation. I will again rebuild this man's house the way that I want it rebuilt. The heat bent the steel foundation, but it is still there. The enemy came to destroy this man's foundation, but he could not, because it's like this steel. My will is for him to regain all that has been taken from him. I saw the trees. So he told me to write down the word trees. And so then this is what he told me. Trees offered shelter from mankind, and the enemy took his shelter. I will build a spiritual shelter. The enemy wanted to destroy this man's covering. The enemy came and took my son's covering. Now I will spring forth a new covering, a new spiritual covering that will never be penetrated. Tell him that I am that I am. He will never come under this form of destruction again. This is my word. And the word, my word, was almost like a covenant or promise to you for this man. So the interpretation of the word fence he gave to me was he surrounded his property with a fence, which was a barrier for protection. I will restore a spiritual barrier for his family that will protect them. So then he gave me the word gate. And what's left as a symbol that his gate, which is in parentheses heart, is still open to me and will not be burnt or destroyed. I will dwell with this man that will not be taken from him. His spirit will never be closed off or destroyed. But that's the symbol that he showed me to interpret. Then neighbors. And so he gave me the word neighbor. And he said his privacy with his neighbors has been uncovered, and they will not harm him. Those that get close to him in his life from now forward will not harm him. And so he told me to write down north wind. And this is what he said. He has been preaching that the winds will blow. It had to come first in his life. God's justice must come first because his words are, and I put Eliyahu, are pure. It had to come like this. It's interesting. The next word he gave me was the ground. And he had me look at the ground. And this is what he told me. It has been scorched and is something of a blessing. It will bring forth new life and a purity of my hand through my nature, and it had to be scorched. Then the next word was the sky. The sky was brown and blocked the sun from shining through. This is during the fire, when it first came. The enemy came to block my will from entering this man's life. His life is to spread the pure light into the world. Interesting. And now this enemy will not touch him like this. In other words, I got that this form of an attack, yes, because my justice and my laws. Bring forth all that I have called you to do from this spot, and rebuild until I tell you otherwise.
I saw this first series of messages being really a personal message about me and the property, an encouraging message as we began to take on the task of rebuilding there in that place. After that, through Mark, the Lord then presented a 7-word message clearly stating what my role would be among his people from that time forward. This is what he said.
Yahweh gave me 7 words. He gave me 7 words concerning you. The first word was came, and this is what he wrote after that. You are going to come to a different place than you ever been before. You came when I told you to come. You have followed my teaching. You have led many by teaching them. Come back to the place you started. Act as my son, for you are. Second word was trust. He said, come here before me because you will need to hear me better than you ever have before. You have come so far, but you must go further. Many are depending upon you to hear my voice. You are my son whom I am well pleased. You shall become a greater man of God than you ever imagined. Trust completely. Third word was town. They shall run from the cities to the places where they cannot be harmed. They think it is in towns, but it is not the place. I'm calling them home to my dwelling house in my town. Lead them to my house. The next word is sight. You have the gift to see. They cannot see. You are their eyes. I made their eyes to see and their ears to hear, but that is different. See for them. Tell them where to go through the darkness that is coming on the earth. The next word was go. Go, my son. Take with you all my power, dominion, and authority. Wreak havoc on the enemy. Make many more like you. Put this in your memory that in big, bold words that an enemy came to destroy you. Now it's time to wreak havoc on his kingdom. The next word is command. An officer commands and gathers great sorrows in his wake because he sees his troops fight and die. You must look at this differently, my son. We will win. You are commanding my army. Slaughter the enemy in front of you. It is something you must accept. You are my commander. The next word he gave me was authority. Governance with power. You shall lead many people with this authority, for there is a position. I am bringing my children back to my land where all authority is given. No one earns this unless they earn this through my will. Your authority is to lead them back, and you will. What I see is almost like a seal in a book or a stamp that you've given authority to open up and grant or sealed up. It's pure authority. He's giving you that, and your name's written in a book, and this is your position.
I took this word very seriously. This message was not a surprise to me. It was, in fact, a confirmation of what the Lord had already said to me, not only just recently, but over a period of years. And I had been working, in fact, at doing the things that it spoke about in the message. And throughout the period even of the fire, I had not missed even one radio message going out from the ministry, even though that was difficult to do. We began rebuilding immediately while moving forward with the ministry. But now we had a confirmed authority to get this job done, and we set to work with that confirmed authority to do the job. It took us a while. Remember, the property was completely destroyed, and it had to be totally cleared. A lot of work had to happen. Buildings had to be rebuilt. But by 2015, we had rebuilt to a place where we could fully serve on the Zion property. What you're looking at here is our Zion Tabernacle building, where we hold our meetings. We have other buildings on the property as well, including places, of course, for our Zion volunteers to live. And we have continued building, just as the Lord said in that message. Also, in 2015, we produced at this new facility a seminar called the Beasts of Daniel Surfacing Seminar, revealing what was happening in the world, how the one world government, which is represented in the scripture as a beast, was actually staring and was showing forth to the world. This seminar has been offered free online at zion.net since 2015. It's still there. It is being totally proven out since 2015 with each passing year, and things are advancing as we would expect according to this seminar. You can come and listen to this yourself. As you can see here on the cover of the DVD that we made of the seminar, it is revealing the world government foretold by Daniel the prophet, that it is now surfacing. In harmony with this truth that we were revealing and are revealing, as another example, we have the next year, 2016. This is a newsletter, a portion actually of that newsletter from 2016, where I'm writing about matters having to do with Donald Trump. Now, it's interesting that I published this on March 16th, 2016. Donald Trump was not even nominated yet. He was not nominated until July of 2016. In part, this is what I wrote. Most Americans want to stop the madness now. That is the madness going on in America. And Donald Trump is the man they're pinning their hopes on to do it. Wow, are they going to be angry when the elite either stop, convert, or kill Donald Trump. One of these will happen because the future has already been decided. And while there are still many who are opposed to it, the plan is for a socialist world government. I never backed away from this statement, even though many were saying that things had changed when Donald Trump became president, that there was going to be a new emergence of conservatism that would sweep the country and the world and overturn globalism. I never bought into that, and this has always been my message. And now, in recent days, this seems to have happened, and the administration of Donald Trump has, in fact, been stopped by the elite. I told you that would happen before Donald Trump was ever nominated. Here's some of the content we've produced for this crisis. As you can see, I've been very busy doing the things the Lord told me to do in those messages. We have produced hundreds of hours of content to prepare His people for this crisis. And a great deal of this information is free. Certainly you can come and know what we're saying and what this is all about, and it'll cost you nothing just to sign up at zion.net and go through this. Most recently, we have come out with this message, the one and only nation written in the stars. This is very appropriate for where we're at right now and the things that I'm talking about today, because it's talking about signs in the sky. Relevant signs that match up with the scriptures and Bible prophecy. This is available to you as well. I'm sharing all these examples of what I've been doing and saying since 2008. So you can see I've not been bringing a popular message to build a following, but I have been working diligently to get this message out. What I have been doing is bringing a consistent message based solidly in the Word that has been borne out as true by real unfolding events in the real world, even though it's not what people want to have happen. And I've done this, and I've been able to do this because, as that message brought to me by the Lord's prophet says, I have a gift to see. And I have been seeing, and I have been reporting to you the things that I'm seeing, whether the things you will like to hear or not. I have consistently told you the truth. Now let's look at the signs in the sky that spell doom for America. December 14th, 2020. This was the day that the Electoral College elected Joe Biden for the next president of the United States. This was also the day of a total solar eclipse that occurred on December 14th, 2020. A solar eclipse can be a sign of death. I could cite many examples, but the most important is the one you find in Matthew 27:45, where a solar eclipse was present at the time of the death of Yeshua Messiah. But what death occurred on December 14th, 2020? Here's a quote by Theodore Roosevelt that I think speaks to this. He said, "The death knell of the Republic had rung as soon as the active power became lodged in the hands of those who sought not to do justice to all citizens, rich and poor alike, but to stand for one special class and for its interest as opposed to the interests of others." Here, what Roosevelt is seeing is that the republic is meant to represent all people, and it is to offer equal justice under the law to all people, not just to a certain elite group. And when the power should pass from the people to a certain elite group, that is the death knell of the republic, because it's really not a republic anymore. Some believe this is what just happened when those electors of the Electoral College made their choice on December 14th, 2020. Some say government of, by, for the people, that is the republic, died on that day. They say election by the people was morphed into selection by the elite. They say that simple math shows that Biden claimed 13 million more votes than there were eligible voters in the 2020 election. I decided to test these numbers, and so I looked up all of these sources and I added them up, and I did the math, the simple math. It's very simple. There were 213.8 million registered voters in the United States at the time of the election. There were 66.2% that voted in the election. So when we subtract the votes that were cast for Trump, what we found out was there's 67.3 million legal votes left available for the other candidate. However, the other candidate got 81.2 million total votes. In other words, 13.9 million of what I'll call excess votes. More votes than there were voters. Here's an article from Forbes. It said, Donald Trump's presidency will end on the day of a comet, a meteor shower, and a total eclipse of the sun. That's a pretty busy sky that day. It also said, delve into the dates, and it gets even odder. Because December 14th, 2020 is exactly halfway between two great American eclipses, which are extremely rare events. Interesting to note that total solar eclipses are a recurring theme in North America at the moment. How interesting that there was a total eclipse on the day that some say the Republic died, and that day happens to be right in the middle of the two great American eclipses. What is this talking about? This article, also from Forbes, but from a different writer, says this. When is the next eclipse? We're now exactly halfway between the great American eclipses of 2017 and 2024. Here they are. This is the path of totality of the eclipse of August 21st, 2017. This was the first coast-to-coast total solar eclipse in nearly 100 years, and it was the first total eclipse exclusive to the United States since before the nation's founding. An extremely rare event all by itself. The next total solar eclipse in the United States will occur on April 8th, 2024. As you can see here, the path of totality will cross the country over 13 states, entering in Texas, which happens to be where I live now, and exiting in Maine, which happens to be where I was born. Here's the path of the two solar eclipses. They're separated by about 7 years. The date halfway between these two rare American total solar eclipses is December 14th, 2020, the day the Republic died. Going back into ancient times, a mark made like a cross is a mark marking something. Certainly, a mark like this made by the sun can only represent something being done by the Creator. And the scale of this tells us this is greater than the writing on the wall in the book of Daniel. And this is, in fact, the mark of Elohim crossing out America. When I saw this message. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Perez, Ummah, Sinim. It means, Mene, Elohim has numbered your empire and brought it to an end. Tekel, you are weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Perez, your empire is divided. Ummah Sinim, and given to the globalists and the Chinese. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt. This message is startling. Hard for many people to believe that this could happen and happen so quickly. If you see it, no doubt you're wondering, what do I do now? Friends, there will be boots on the ground in America from the Chinese and from the United Nations. And when that happens, it won't be good for anybody who lives here. Here are your options. Option 1, do nothing. Have fun. Go along to get along. And simply be assimilated into the collective when the time comes, in a few years or less, of course, starting already. Meanwhile, you can brush up on all the politically correct lingo so you can fit in. You also might like to get started learning to speak Chinese because that could become very useful before long. And keep this in mind, though. You might also want to pay closer attention in 2024 when this sign comes to an end. And by the way, the 6th and 7th seals come after that to bring more judgment on the world's nations. This is why also we're inviting the righteous of all the nations of the world to join us in the option that's set before us. Option 2, some will prefer to be part of the resistance against the tyranny. And I totally get that. And I even admire the valor of those who take this option. But then I wonder, is it noble or is it stupid to mount a war that's already determined you can't win? That's something for you to decide. Then we have option 3. Many will use the flea on the dog strategy. The flea mostly isn't noticed by the dog, right? Just too small, buried under all that hair. So the idea is hiding out in remote rural towns and villages where you won't be noticed, thinking you won't be touched there. It sounds logical, but the Lord told me that's not the place. What he said is, they shall run from the cities to the places where they cannot be harmed. They think it's in towns, but that's not the place. I'm calling them home to my dwelling house in my town. Lead them to my house, the Lord said. Well, I can hear some responding right now. That's the pre-tribulation rapture, right? Wrong. Wrong. That's a false doctrine from the devil meant to lull you to sleep. It's worked tremendously well with a lot of people. The scriptures clearly say that those who are part of the body of Messiah, they are joined to him after the tribulation. Read it yourself in Matthew 24. Yet many are so smug in their beliefs, they will do nothing about the current situation. They believe nothing bad can come to them because they are sure the pre-trib rapture will happen first, and surely God would never let anything bad happen to them. That is a foolish thought. Remember this? Peter said Elohim waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, few, that is 8 souls, were saved through the water. And I remind you, Elohim shows his greatness by bringing his people through times of judgment. He didn't snatch Noah away to heaven while the bad things were happening. Instead, Noah and his family worked hard for 100 years to prepare ahead of time for the events that were happening. And then the Creator brought righteous Noah and his family through that time. I should add here too, Yeshua said, just as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Here we have another example. When Yeshua was with us on the earth, he warned, Luke 21, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is at hand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart. This was a sign that he gave to his followers where he was telling them where to flee to and when to flee. But you might say, well, how could you flee once Jerusalem was surrounded by armies? You're already trapped. Well, how it actually worked out is Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, and then for no known reason, they just withdrew. So the sign had happened, and that's when the believers in Jerusalem and the area recognized the sign and in an organized way got out of there before the destruction fell. This is all a matter of history. Those believers withdrew to a place called Pella in Syria, where they were safe, while Jerusalem and those occupying it at the time, which there were millions because of the feasts, where many of them were killed or taken captive, and there was utter destruction. They weren't snatched away to heaven. They fled with a sign as was spoken to them. In somewhat more recent history, we have the Pilgrims. They didn't feel that they had to stand and fight the tyranny in the country they lived in. Instead, the Pilgrims fled tyranny to create a new society based on faith and Scripture in a new world prepared for them ahead of time by the hand of God. It was a new world to them. They didn't know how to live there. So when they first arrived, many of them lost their lives. However, the Pilgrims received help they had not expected from the people of the dawn. Oh, you don't recognize the name People of the Dawn? You think maybe they're Native Americans? They never heard that term. They called themselves the People of the Dawn because they lived along the shores of Massachusetts, up through Maine, and even up into what is today Canada. Hundreds of them. And it just so happens that my grandmother was descended from these folks. She was a full-blooded one of these folks, in her case of the Penobscot tribe. And these folks met the Pilgrims, and they treated them kindly. They taught them how to farm. They taught them how to live in that rugged situation, and the Pilgrims were blessed by that. They didn't know ahead of time this would happen, but this was prearranged by the divine. And this was a two-way street because the Pilgrims brought them the good news about Messiah. It's very interesting about the Penobscot people. The cross is part of their logo because they've believed in the Messiah from very early times. And they learned about the Messiah from the Pilgrims and other believers that came here to America. It's not a story of the Pilgrims coming in and trying to destroy these people. It is a story of friendship, even though now the history is being rewritten by people who don't like what really happened. What really happened was this, that while this situation existed between the people of the dawn and the Pilgrims, other people, selfish people, opportunists, wanted to take advantage now of the success the Pilgrims had had. They came into America. So you had two elements in America. You had those who were true believers in faith, and you had others, unfortunately, who were the opportunists. These are the people who always rise up eventually to take over. This is what happened in America. Now here we are 400 years later, and we've come full circle from the Pilgrims. The new world has become the old world, and through corruption and greed, tyranny now reigns supreme, and is going to get much worse. Judgment is now upon this land, and like our fathers of faith before us, we must not hesitate to make our exodus while we still can do so. The Lord said, I'm calling them home to my dwelling house in my town. Lead them to my house. The righteous can follow me to his house. I'm going. He already told me that. Want to come with me? Come where? This is what the prophet Jeremiah said. The days come, says Yahweh, that it shall no more be said, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel from all the countries where he had driven them. I will bring them again into their land that I gave to their fathers. Do you know what an astounding statement this is? This is talking about an exodus that would occur that would pale the exodus of Moses into trivia. And that was no small thing. Parting the Red Sea, for example, huge thing. The exodus, though, that this is prophesying would be so great from all the nations, not just one nation, that the original exodus would pale in comparison. Has that exodus happened? It's not happened. Not yet. Time is running out in this age. Isn't this exactly what the Lord was speaking to me in that message? Bring us home to our land. That he's given me that job of leading his people home to that land. This is all in the scriptures, friends. It doesn't really fit in very well with evangelical or other denominational doctrine. So you probably haven't heard about it very much. However, this is all through the prophets talking about this. This is the way of escape here in these final days. This is the way. And you're hearing about it right now because you need to hear about it right now. This is what's going to happen. This is my commission. Authority is governance with power. You shall lead my people with this authority, for there is a position. I'm bringing my children back to my land where all authority is given. No one earns this unless they earn this through my will. Your authority is to lead them back, and you will. The Lord has told me this. I believe this. This is true. This is my authority to lead his people back. Now, let's say you're seeing me and you're saying, well, I don't really like that guy. Well, if that's what you think, please get in line, because there's lots of people that feel that way about me, okay? Because I haven't been telling people the things they want to hear. So I'm a bad guy. Do you know anyone else like that these days? But what I'm saying to you is, whether you like me or don't like me is not the issue. The issue is, the Lord has given me this commission, and I am determined I'm going to fulfill this commission. So it's your choice whether you want to be involved or not. It's not about me as a person. It's about me as having this commission the Lord has given me, and I am doing my best to fulfill it. This is why I've laid all this out for you, so that you can see that I'm serious about this. And that I am the person, in fact, that has been chosen with this authority to lead his people back home again to our land. And where else would the final place of safety be? If not in his land, the biblical land that he has kept for his faithful. This is what's going to happen. It might all sound strange to you. This is the way out. The righteous are invited to come with me, if they will seriously devote themselves to preparing themselves for this. All others, they can either repent and join us now, or if they don't want to, or they can't believe any of this, pick another option. It's up to you. If you want to look into this more, here's some of our content to get you up to speed. And if you choose to become involved and to get out while you can in the second Exodus, get started now so we can all get on the same page and that we can get organized together to go out in what the scriptures call holy array, in order from the Lord. And leaders are people who are potential leaders in this movement. Please contact me. because this is not a one-man band. We need lots of leaders to be involved in this for this to succeed. Please contact me, and let's start getting organized for the Remnant Exodus. Zion.net, TSIYON.net. Please go there and get started. That's my message. Signs America is doomed, pointing the way out. Think about it, pray about it. Watch this message over and over again until you get it. I hope you join us.